When it comes to the term Nephilim, to me it's really been surprising. In fact, I've only ever found it in one commentary. The fact that the spelling of the term, Nephilim, really does not conform to what you would do as a writer, how you would spell that term if you meant fallen ones. In Hebrew, you would spell it no-phalim, those who fall or those who are fallen. But we don't have that. We have Nephilim. You might also opt for Nephulim. That would be a passive spelling using the verb form nafal, the root nafal. But we don't have that either. So this idea that Nephilim means fallen ones really does not conform to the way that the word is actually spelled in the Hebrew Bible. And again, I've only ever seen one commentator take note of this, which surprises me. The term itself is best understood as either a noun that comes from Aramaic naphilah, because that would produce Nephilim in Hebrew, or it might be an Aramaic verb nafal that would also produce Nephilim. In both cases, you would have either fallen ones in the sense that there's something corrupt about them, there's something malformed, something in terms of a grotesque or odd appearance. And if it's the noun naphilah, that noun in Aramaic means giant. And this is important because a lot of scholars feel that the context for Genesis 1 through 11 is Babylon, whether it was composed in the Babylonian era or whether it draws on Babylonian items or motifs for theological purposes. Aramaic was where the Hebrews were exposed to the block script and that language, because after the cuneiform languages in Babylon, Aramaic was the language of the period. So it makes sense that there would be this connection. The other thing I would say is when you go to other translations of the Hebrew Bible, and specifically I mean here the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament, and also Targums, which are the Aramaic translation of the Old Testament, in both of those cases, they will use words in their language that mean giant for Nephilim. They don't opt for something more abstract like fallen ones. The Septuagint uses gigantes, which is giants. So I think it's very consistent. It's more consistent with the way ancient translators apparently understood the term, to argue for the fact that, hey, the spelling's important, and the only way you really get to the biblical spelling is starting with a word that means giant in Aramaic. Now, one of the oddities you'll see when you read the works of Zechariah Sitchin and those who follow him are taking a term like Nephilim and somehow getting a translation like those who came down, again trying to make them sound like ancient astronauts, or people of the fiery rockets. Both of those translations are demonstrably incorrect in biblical Hebrew. I think the latter one is just patently absurd. But they're incorrect, and we know they're incorrect because the idea of coming down or who were sent down, you can't really get there if you think Nephilim came from the Hebrew verb nafal, which means to fall. It would be spelled entirely differently in the Hebrew Bible if the meaning was to be sent down. Again, I have a discussion of this on my website, sitchiniswrong.com, if you click on the tab for Nephilim. The other issue is that the normal Hebrew word for come down is yarad, which is not nafal, very obviously. And so these sorts of meanings are contrived. They really have no basis in Hebrew grammar or Hebrew vocabulary. Well, the whole Nephilim passage, Genesis 6 verses 1 through 4, is admittedly weird. It's one of those go-to weird passages in the Bible that seems to come up, especially among people who would really resist or not have a supernatural worldview. But as weird as it is, the key there is a supernatural worldview. If we believe that there are intelligent beings outside our own created world, our own material world, if we believe in this thing we call the supernatural, then what the Bible presents us with here is the possibility, at least, and this isn't the only way that you could read Genesis 6, 1 through 4 and take it seriously, but we'll just go with it for the sake of the question. If we believe that there is such a thing as supernatural power, supernatural ability, where a divine being could manifest in physical, corporeal form, and that's the way angels are consistently depicted in biblical material, if we believe that they assume flesh, then it stands to reason, and there is biblical precedent for the idea, that their flesh can do things our flesh does. In other words, if you're going to assume flesh, then it brings with it the capacities, and in some senses, the limitations as well. So a lot of this, taking Genesis 6, 1 through 4 as some sort of literal cohabitation, really extends from that idea that a supernatural entity who can assume genuine physical form, and again, if you have a supernatural entity, why would you limit a supernatural entity from doing that? Again, on what basis would you have for limiting that property? If you're going to allow for that, then this idea of being able to mingle with human flesh on some level or in some way proceeds from those assumptions. But again, that's not the only way to take it, but it certainly is on the table if you believe in a supernatural sort of ability and supernatural existence of certain beings.